All right. Well, it's Wednesday. Okay. Thanks, Chris. It's Wednesday, and it's quite possible that it may feel like Friday or Saturday uh, for lots of people. We've definitely had our spent doing things differently as a society, and it is what it is basically where we find ourselves. So I just want to say thank you for being here tonight and providing some sense of normalcy, even for me as a teacher to be able to share um, time with you on a Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, just like what we're used to. And so, just thank you for providing some of that stability to me as well. Um, we've been on a journey since March 4th in our class discussing how it is that we can be filled by Christ so that we can power positive change in a world that's really divided, in a world that's distracted, just in a world that's really seems broken and lost. So it's actually kind of funny to me, and I say that funny as like irony. It's kind of ironic to me that we've been exploring that topic in our class in one of the um, times of our country, the times of the world, with like one of the largest pauses going on, um, at least in my lifetime. And so I just find it interesting that in the midst of trying to figure out how to positively impact the world that seems distracted, that seems divided, there's like this pause button on all of the normal things that we're used to. And so just really thinking about, how different that is and how ironic it is, um, with a few exceptions to people in certain jobs and certain places around the country and around the world. So far in our class, we've introduced the topic. Um, we've discussed running the marathon of life and the type of mindset that requires. Um, we've discussed how we can fuel our body. We've discussed how we can fuel our spirit, and we took a couple of classes to do that. And for the last 2 weeks, we've also explored historical, literally like thousands of years ago, historical divisions. And we noticed that some division was ordained. It seems like there is a reason for that division, looking at what God was doing with the people and with society and with the world at the time. There seemed to be a very real reason why that division was there. And in many ways, it was a physical um, it was a physical separation. It was a physical marker. It was an indicator of God with people. And then we contrasted that with man's historical division. And so we've looked at it from a historical perspective where um, it wasn't really what was good for God. It was selfishness. It was about appearances. It was about, um, just the outside, not really what was inside with people. And it didn't reflect any real aspect or element of God's glory. And so that's kind of where we've been in our class. And tonight we're going to look at some of the divisions that have occurred since then and a little bit more of a historical context as far as some different milestones or different markers in history that will continue down a very deliberate road that we're going when it comes to division. So, if we were to step through world history, we would quickly see just how divided it has been. So if we think about the history of the world in different times since Jesus was born and died and raised, there's some different mile markers that we can relate to. So one of the very first ones would be the death of Herod the Great, sometime around 4 BC, and he's the ruler of the Roman province of Judea. Some suggest that around 27 AD, Jesus was baptized. Around 80 AD, that's fun for me to say, around 80 AD, the Colosseum that we see the ruins of in Rome, supposedly somewhere around 80 AD, that Colosseum was open to the public. All right, so that's a little bit of a time forward. Then we skip ahead to AD 312, give or take, and the Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome. And I think that that's one worth noting and is quite pivotal across Western society and different religious things that took place and transpired after that occurred. So 312 approximately AD. In 540, this one is something that's may not be as historically significant to you, but was kind of interesting to me. In 540, give or take, AD, Ethiopians translated the Bible into one of the dialects called Ge'ez. So around 540 AD, Ethiopians translated part of the Bible into Ge'ez. In 650 AD, the Babylonian Talmud was completed, somewhere around there. And basically that's like the Jewish civil and ceremonial law. So it's kind of interesting if you think, at that time period, 650 AD, and you compare that to now, as far as like Babylon is concerned in Israel. So you think modern day Iraq and you think modern day Israel, it's just kind of an interesting aside for me. So 650 AD, the Babylonian Talmud, a historically significant document. 800 AD, Charlemagne became Roman emperor. That's a name that lots of people have probably heard. So again, you'll say, okay, not really. These are all historical events indicating some type of division or something that was taking place, something separating. All right, 969 AD, in the region of what's now Ukraine, the group, the Kiev Rus, so around the city of Kiev and the prince and those ruling that area, they adopted Orthodox Christianity. So if you were to travel there now, you'll see all these Orthodox churches, and it's very much ingrained in the society there, but looks quite a bit different than the type of Christianity that you would see practiced elsewhere in the West and specifically here in the United States. So 969 AD on that one. 1240 AD, Genghis Khan rules over the Mongol Empire, somewhere around there. Around 1356, the 100 Years' War. Okay, interesting story around that one in England and people being kidnapped. The 100 Years' War. Also around that time period, 1368, give or take, the Ming Dynasty, which lasted nearly 300 years. So you think about that relative to the age of the United States. So just interesting there. 1453, the year that people say that the Roman Empire truly fell, where the capital at the time in Constantinople was overrun, and the Ottoman Empire was firmly established in what is now modern day Istanbul or Turkey. And so you think back to AD 300 and Constantine establishing the capital and making Christianity the religion, official religion there of the Roman Empire. And then you skip forward to the 1400s, so 1100 years or so, and you have modern day Turkey, but the Ottoman Empire taking over there. So I think that's enough covering different dates and different types of events that, for whatever reason, grab my attention and I think play into hopefully grabbing your attention in the topic that what we're really thinking about, giving us an interesting perspective about history and division and things that we've seen throughout more modern times than what we were looking at with ancient people in the Bible. So then we move into a little bit more familiar territory. So you think about Columbus, you think about the founding, like people physically finding the continent of America, North and South America. You think about the establishment of some of the first cities or first colonies. Maybe you might then think a little bit more about the American Revolution and what it symbolized, and world powers and tiny people, or however you want to categorize it. But thinking then again about the differences there with people and division. You think about a new country and the different philosophical differences people had about how much control a government should or shouldn't have. How do you deal with people that seem to be hostile? Western movement, or the great expansion of the West. You think perhaps about Texas and it becoming its own country and state. Civil War, or the way that it's currently presented as the war between the states. So lots and lots of elements if we look through history throughout the world, and then here on our continent, here in the United States specifically. There are all types of time periods where there was strife and struggle that were historically significant. And you can be assured that within those there were even, additional pockets of division or strife or frustration, or people feeling like America had lost its way, or you have times of what's known as the Great Awakening or things like that. So needless to say, I think it's pretty clear that when we look at man, we look at people, we look at the world, society, it's firmly established that division really seems to me to be built into our culture. So even nowadays, you get further divisions, you get further almost isolations amongst people in groups. So I want to be clear, all of this is building towards something significant as far as what we consider and we look at division. So I know we haven't cracked open our Bibles yet. I know that's what we're here for. We will get there. But it's very clear to me that division has been baked into our culture. So even right now, pretty much anywhere you go, anything you fill out, you've got your age, you've got your race, you've got your gender, you've got your name. So those are immediately things that people are divided or classified as. Then you throw into that things like ethnicity. You throw into things like political parties, employment. Even within employment, you've got folks that are full-time employees and part-time employees and contract employees and essential employees and non-essential employees and essential businesses and non-essential businesses. You have people, even now, right, we've got debates on whether you should be gloved or not gloved, or masked or not masked, or numerical data divisions. You've got divisions around whether governments quote unquote governments should open or close states for business, whatever that really means. Like there are all these discussions baked into our society. And so it's really quite interesting to me that whenever we stop and we reflect on where we've been within our discussions around division, it's really, really clear to me that the divisions that we see nowadays have nothing really to do with what God wants for us. It's a way to weaken people and separate them and make them know that there are things about them that are totally different, even though we're made in the image of the Creator. So if we step back and we look at this, that's one conclusion that I come to. But there's another one that I think that we should also consider, which is when you look back and you just stop and you take yourself out of the equation and you just look outside, you watch the news, you watch people, you read the newspaper, you search the internet, whatever it is that you do to observe people, even if it's, while you're out walking, there's a lot of need externally. If we just look out and we don't even consider ourselves, we can just look out and see that there's a lot of need. You can look out and see that there's a lot of hurt. I mean, you probably don't even have to go one house away from where you are. Even within your own home, there's need, there's hurt, there's brokenness, there's lostness, there's confusion. There are all these things that exist, and you don't have to go very far to see those things or experience them or be able to take notice. Sometimes that is lost on us because of our busyness and because of our activities and being separated and being segregated out into all these different names and numbers and badges and whatever you want to call it. But you can really easily look out and see those things amongst our society. So I thought what would be an interesting thing for us to do in light of this thought exploration is to read a section out of 1 Corinthians chapter 5. And when we do this, I'm not doing this because I've got some inside information about something going on at our congregation or somebody else's congregation. It's just an opportunity for us to pause and reflect about what Paul has to say to the Christians in Corinth and what was taking place. And then we're going to talk about why that matters and in comparison to the divisions that we've explored tonight. All right, so with that, let's turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 1, and then we're going to read all the way through verse 12. All right, so 1 Corinthians chapter 5, starting in verse 1, and we'll go through 12. So in verse 1 it says, "It's actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you." And again, this is Paul writing to the brothers and sisters in Corinth. "And of a kind that does not occur even amongst the pagans. A man has his father's wife. And you are proud. Shouldn't you rather have been filled with grief and have put out of your fellowship the man who did this? Even though I'm not physically present, I am with you in spirit, and I've already passed judgment on the one who did this, just as if I were present. When you're assembled in the name of our Lord Jesus, and I am with you in spirit, and the power of our Lord Jesus is present, hand this man over to Satan, so that the sinful nature may be destroyed and his spirit saved on the day of the Lord. Your boasting is not good." Your boasting is not good. "Don't you know that a little yeast works through the whole batch of dough?" And I'm going to pause right here and put in a side comment. If you want to know anything about yeast working through dough, just look up Janice Rowe or Miss Watrous on some of their Facebook posts about how yeast works through dough, because some of this is totally lost on us as a society where we don't make our own stuff anymore. But you can see what yeast does to dough. And that's what Paul is talking about here. You know that a little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. Get rid of that old yeast, that you may be a new batch without yeast, as you really are. For Christ, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed. Therefore, let us keep the festival, not with the old yeast, the yeast of malice, the yeast of wickedness, but with bread without yeast, the bread of sincerity and truth. I have written you in my letter not to associate with the sexually immoral people, not at all meaning the people of this world who are immoral, or the greedy and the swindlers or the idolaters. In that case, you'd have to leave this world. But now I'm writing you that you must not associate with anyone who calls himself a brother but is sexually immoral or greedy, or an idolater or a slanderer, a drunkard or a swindler. With such a man do not even eat. What business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? God will judge those outside. Expel the wicked man from among you. So, again, the intent of reading this and looking at this is what in the world Paul was talking about as far as how it applies to what we're looking at with division. So you can look at me and you can say, hey, David, it sounds like you're going to try to take this out of context. That's not what I'm trying to do at all. I'm trying to make a point about division and about the separation that should exist between us and the world. The separation that us as a body of a unified group of believers should be when we look at society. And we can even look here in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and Paul says it is so easy for us to look out into the world and see all these people doing wrong things and bad things, and yet you've got it going on inside of your own group of Christian believers, people that are supposed to be following after Christ, and yet you're proud of it. So, again, I don't have any idea that something like this is occurring anywhere in any of the congregations that I know around here or that I have friends with or anything like that. The point is that when it comes to being separate and divisions, we should be able to look out and see a noticeable difference between bodies of believers, separate and apart. And that clearly wasn't taking place inside the Corinthian church. And Paul goes after all types of different things that are going on with the dysfunction there. And so really the thing that I want us to do is to think about how easy it is to look out at the world and see that society is broken, it's immoral. And Paul makes the point that if you're not going to associate with any of these types of people, that you just have to leave the world. And so processing along with me on this journey about division, and the end game of this entire class and this entire session is reaching people who are divided and distracted. It's important for us to understand the history, modern wise, the types of divisions that we see, and a very, very clear illustration of what not to do or what not to embrace or what not to have going on within the body, so that we can be separate, we can be an example, and because those types of things ruins bodies of believers. And I know that I heard people talk about, can't remember if it was online or if it was in Bible class or in one of our sermons, but talking about concern that people had about, maybe it was somebody's post, but concern about us being spread out and divided right now and not being able to be unified, and worry and concern that for our congregations that something like that could happen. And so what I want to do tonight is encourage us and encourage the body that, yes, we know that a yeast can work through the whole bread, and it's really important for us to be separate and set aside and apart, even though we're broken, even though we ourselves will sin, but being very, very mindful about how we live our lives, how we can repent of whatever that sin may be in our lives, how we can ask the congregation for forgiveness, how we can ask a congregation for prayers, how we can ask elders for prayers. There's a whole lot of things that we can do, but one of the things that we can't do is look out at the world and just complain that it's broken, that it's ruined, that it's got need out there. That's one of the last things that we should do, because anybody can go out and look and see that. And it's really easy to sit within a congregation of people that we believe are trying to do the right thing, to look out at society and say, oh, that person's a liar. Oh, that person's greedy. Oh, that person's out to get us. Oh, that person's out to control us. Oh, that person's out to ruin, divide, distract, whatever it is. It's super easy for us to do that. Okay. Paul says, to me, he makes that really clear when he says that you can look out and see that, and that God is going to judge those people. So, yes, you can look out and you can see all that stuff's messed up, and just know you don't have to worry about it. God's got that. He's got it in control. He's going to judge people. That's his right. That's what he gets to do. And so the reason we need to pay close attention to that, and we look at verse 5 and verse 12, it says, what business is it of mine to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge those inside? God will judge those outside. When we go to judge people outside in that way, we're taking God's job. We can look out and we can acknowledge that it's wrong. We can see that it's wrong. We can see that it's problems. We can see that it's killing society, whatever way you want to describe it. The truth of the matter is that our perspective should be just a little bit different, because it's very easy for us to make all of these real inferences. We can come to all these real conclusions about people who aren't God's people. And really what that means is that we take over his job because he's going to judge them. When in reality, perhaps what's needed, when in reality, perhaps what we should see when we look out across this world and we see stuff that's messed up, that doesn't make sense, that makes us sick to our stomach, that makes us nauseous, that makes us want to cry, that makes us angry, that whatever it is, that when we see those things, the nonsense, the depravity, the sickness, the sorrow, all of those things, perhaps we should see need. Perhaps we should see opportunity. Perhaps we need to consider how we as a body contribute to those societal problems that we see. Yes, evil is evil. Yes, wrong is wrong. Yes, the world is broken. But that's not new. We're not breaking any news. We're not surprising anybody. And in fact, that reality and that perspective and that knowing that's exactly the state of the world is what drove God to destroy it. Like those feelings and those emotions, we looked at it earlier in our class sessions about how God felt. And so it shouldn't come as any surprise to us that we have those feelings. Those are real. And hopefully, in some way, they're still raw in a way that drives us to action. Just as God is driven to action as far as he decided to destroy the world and to recreate it and to start over with a small set of people. You fast forward, people still made bad choices. I mean, we looked at all of the divisions between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and even Peter and Paul, and we see the division that existed and the struggle that Peter had with his Jewish friends and the Jewish pressure within his own journey of life. Like, those things didn't go away. And that's precisely why God sent Jesus. That's why he was allowed, permitted, however you want to describe it. That's why it happened in a way that Jesus was slain. And if you think back, for those of you that have caught it, you think back to what Ken said on Sunday about there's a reason that Jesus had to die. There's a reason that he had to be crucified and resurrected. None of this is new when we look out into the world. I mean, even if we just wanted to belabor it, I mean, we could go back and we could read Solomon. Nothing is new under the sun. And so the times change or the instruments change or whatever it is, but it's still the same root issues. And to me, that's why our study is important. That's why it's